Welcome to the FYE Talks podcast for our episode, Things I Wish You Knew, Uncomfortable Conversations with African American Colleagues, Part 2.
Good afternoon and welcome to another FYE Podcast Talks. My name is Jerisa Lamons. I'm the Director of Cultural Diversity here at Elizabethtown Community and Technical College. Go Barons. I am joined here today by some of my favorite colleagues that I will allow to introduce themselves. We are happy to bring you part 2. We are really sure that this is going to win some sort of Oscar or Emmy because we have put in the hard work to get this done. So I'm going to start with seniority first and allow Miss Pam Harper to introduce herself.
Hello, this is Miss Pam Harper. Yes, I am one of the oldest. But the goodness, okay, remember? I've been here at Elizabethtown Community and Technical College before it was that, ECTC. It was Elizabethtown Community College, around 40 years. So I have had the opportunity to basically work in a variety of different areas, from being an actual instructor in a classroom to being a supervisor over the Learning Lab at one point in time, and now I'm the director of the Educational Excellence Center. I have had the opportunity not only to be a part-time instructor, but also one in which we basically have worked with students on campus as well as off. So, yes, I've been here forever and a day. The only other person on this campus
Who is that? I can't imagine.
Longer than me has been Dale Buckles and Diane Owsley. It's like, oh my God, I'm in the top 3.
I feel like we're being haunted by a ghost.
Let's go.
All right, and next I'll have Ms. Shantae Sharber introduce herself.
All right. Hello, my name is Shantae Sharber. I'm the Ready to Work program coordinator here at ECTC. I've been here for almost 6 years. December will be year 6, starting year 6. But I've been with KCTCS since 2009, so almost 11 years total with the system, but 6 years with ECTC.
I just have to say, Shantae was probably, I think I was probably one of the first people that you met when you got here to E-Town.
You were.
And it was definitely kindred spirit from the beginning.
You were.
And I'll allow Ms. Pam Best to introduce herself.
Yes, I'm Pam Best. I'm with the First Year Experience Program. I've been here for about 9 months, going on a year very soon, November. Yay, rah, rah. I'm used to doing social service and counseling jobs. I love and enjoy empowering people, helping people to reach their goals and be successful in life. And this job here as a success coach allows me to help young people transition to their dreams. So I'm glad I'm part of ECTC family, and you can just call me Miss Best.
And we are happy to have you, Ms.
Thank
Best. You're such a good spirit. So in our part 1, we got to talk a little bit about what I'll probably equate to talking about our childhood memories and our experiences growing up as Black females, as children. Now I think part 2 is a good time for us to transition into talking about some of those experiences as professional Black women, as well as just being adult Black women. So I heard from a little bird on Facebook that one of our participants got to attend the March on Washington. So I think that's a great opener because historically the March on Washington has been about equity, just togetherness, and so it's been a dream of mine to attend something like that. So I get to live vicariously through Shantae's experience. Shantae, share a little bit about your experience with the March on Washington.
Oh, it was a lot of positivity in the air outside of the humidity and the heat. It was very hot that day. But it just felt good. It just seemed like everybody was there for the same reasons. There were a lot of great speakers. Dr. Martin Luther King's granddaughter spoke, and she was dynamic. I mean, this is a little girl. She's probably, 12, 13. You know, she's very young, and her speech was magnificent. Pastor Jamal Bryant out of Georgia took us to church. And even Kentucky's own Charles Booker spoke, you know, from the hood to the holler,
Yes.
as he called it. And so for me, it was something I just felt like I had to go to. I said during when Al Sharpton mentioned it at George Floyd's funeral that it was going to happen. I just kind of said to myself, oh, I'm going to go. But I made no preparation to go. It was just something I said I wanted. And then the day before the march, I woke up, and it was Thursday, the day before. I was like, I'm going to drive to D.C. in the morning. And everybody was like, what? Like, who does that? I was like, yeah, I'm just going to drive. It's okay. But thank goodness I have friends who work at the airline. They're like, oh, you're still on our buddy pass list. We got you. Just buy, we got you. And that's how I went. Because I needed to come back Sunday because I had something to do. And driving back just wouldn't have been ideal. I would have been tired. But so I flew there Friday morning. I flew back Sunday. It was just a great experience.
Experience that you'll never forget.
Oh no! Now I hope to be back for the 60th. I think the only thing for me that was just kind of in feeling very proud to be there, and the camaraderie and everybody rallying together, saying, we're not going to stand for this. This is the wrong generation. We're going to fight back. These plans. To mobilize and to strategize and to, really bring, make your voice heard. It just struck me as sad that here we are 57 years later, still marching, still fighting for the same thing, equality, for the United States to hold up to the Constitution where it says, for all. It's never been that. So it felt great, but at the same time, we have just so much more work to do as a collective to get us where it is for all. And, all men are created equal, because we know that we haven't lived up to that.
Right.
As a country.
Well, and you mentioned collectivism, and so I'm going to go back on that thing because as we were sitting here waiting for tech setup, we were having a small conversation about the past marches on Washington and possibly just kind of going over how integration really changed the way that Black Americans and white Americans assimilate and live together. And Miss Pam, you made a really good point. Would you go back over that point for the audience to hear? I really thought it was a good point about how integration was a good and possibly a bad thing as well.
You have to understand, my father was at the very first March on Washington. He slept under a Greyhound bus, okay? Everyone at that march, they worked together. They shared a sandwich. They did. It was like they were all in this together. There was more of a collective body. During his time and my time, there was a Black Power movement. There was a movement in which it was seen as unity for the whole race. Yes, you had a few people that may have been fragmented, or what they used to call Uncle Toms or whatever, but it was never so much this individualism that it is now. It's like the millennials and those afterwards all of a sudden started thinking about themselves. It's all about me, instead of what about the group? What about this collective body? So I think when you don't know your history, you have a tendency to repeat it. So it seems like now what you all are doing is going back to what was years ago, because you didn't understand you had to keep moving. It was like at some point, somewhere, they thought they all had arrived and there was this equality, and then all of a sudden now it's like you all woke up, oh no, we're not equal.
But it's a continuous process, right, Ms. Pam? It continues to evolve. It's fluid, right?
And when I go back, say for instance, to my alma mater, Murray State, and I look at the students there compared to the students when I attended, we only had 300. We knew each other by name. We helped one another. If you were in this class, we gave you notes. If you didn't have but a 5-2 meal ticket and I had a 7-3 meal ticket, the days I didn't eat, I let you eat out my meal ticket. It was that type of unity, that type of belongingness. And that I don't see now. I see more of, this is all about me, I got to do what I got to do for me. And that is one of the biggest differences I see now.
Right. And you and Miss Pam Best kind of are similar in ages too. So what is your take? Give me some of the memories that you have maybe from recalling back on Integration Segregation March on Washington.
Well, I just think I wish I was there. I would love to be a part of that, but like Pam was saying, the camaraderie, the togetherness, because back then, because things weren't segregated, you had to be together. You had to have each other's back. We were taught that. We lived that daily. You know, the whole community was raised by your aunt, my mom and dad. But I think as segregation began and we began to segregate in schools, not only were we taught that we had rights, but we were also bussed out. We were separated, and therefore separated from one another. And we lost that community sense. That broke up that community. And not only were we were taught that, and from generation to generation, we teach our kids, hey, you have a right to do this, protest. But when you get outside of school, you don't have that right. You don't get to exercise those rights, but you've been taught that you do. So you don't have that sense of, like, we knew better. We knew, because we were taught, like, even outside school, whether it was church, our neighbor, or your parents, we got the talk before we left the house. This is what you can do, this is what you can't do. But this generation now is not really taught that, because we instill you have a right to do, you have a right to vote, which you do, and you should exercise the right to vote, everyone. But you have a right to vote. You have a right to go to any restaurant you want to go, because of the people who came before you fought for that and got that. But that sense of freedom is where in their mind they're free. And I believe our generation, even though we want freedom, we weren't free here. And that kept us guarded from doing the things and going outside of our community. But the younger generation is free here. And I think in a way it's good, because those are the people who's fighting now, like Shantae. I got a right to go to Washington fight. I deserve this. I'm an American. So it's good on the other hand, but it has separated us into being more individualized.
And by virtue of that, they have not learned their culture the way we were taught our culture. I mean, you had the Sunday school teacher, your actual school teacher, you had the people at the grocery store. Everybody worked together. Everybody had the right to discipline you.
Right.
If you were out of line, it didn't make any difference if Miss Maybottle down the street saw you acting foolish.
Right.
By the time you got home, not only did you get that whooping from Miss Maybottle, but you got
That'll
it
be
again from her.
3 whoopings squared.
Thank you.
Yes.
Because but whereas now, you better not even say anything to somebody's child.
Don't touch
I
them.
mean, even if the child is in harm's way, you're fearful of saying, baby, get out of the street.
Right.
Because you don't know how that parent will respond, and here you trying to help the poor child.
Exactly.
Whereas in my day, Miss Maybell said you did this. You gonna lie about Miss? Did Miss Maybell tell a lie? No, ma'am. In the discussion, whatever Miss Maybell said, that was it. Because people took care of one another. They looked out for one another. It wasn't all this, I'm worried about child abuse, this and that. You better not touch nobody's kid. They kill them right there on the spot. But nowadays, people, everything and anything comes into their mind, instead of thinking, okay, what's the better good here? Am I truly helping in some way? People don't feel that sense of responsibility for another individual like they used to.
I think that's a great point, because you really have to be taught that. And like you said, our community, the barbershops, like everywhere you turn, you were taught, I'm responsible for you. Wherever we go, even crossing the street, we hold hands. I'm responsible.
We would help one
I have a responsibility to protect you and to help one another. And you know, that's just not part of this culture now.
But I don't know, because I feel like Shantae and I are kind of kindred spirits. Like, if I see somebody in need, I will help them. Layla can tell you, we just got through this morning helping people in our neighborhood. Like, I don't know, we just do that. And maybe it's because my mom is of the generation where she was raised by her grandparents, and she understood that, so she taught that to us. I mean, because we used to get 2 whooping square too, because if you went to school and you did something, they were going to tell your mom. If your mom had to leave work, she was going to get a whooping on the way home.
Because made her leave work.
You made her leave work. You playing with my money, playing with my dollar bill. And then when you got home, Grandma got you, and then Granddaddy would get you. And when Aunt Bibbin came home, she would get me. So excuse me, I got 4 whoopings. I don't even know if there's a math or formula to go through that. But see, I was smart. I didn't get whooped that often, so I kind of stayed away from that.
Right. And for me, because I don't feel like that I'm that old, but, old enough, I feel like people who are younger than me, like, I don't know who raised y'all. So even when we talk, when we group like millennials and we're all divided, the baby boomers, the millennials, the Gen X's, and all these classes of people, I don't feel like anybody that I know fits in that, because we grew up with certain things. We grew up with a sense of community. We grew up, well, I will say for me and the people I grew up with, because I grew up in a small area and everybody knew everybody. And if Leroy got on Keena and Granddaddy got on Kanisha and Shalata, then Shantae would get it too. Because we were all together. Well, you should have known better.
Somebody should have said something.
If everybody jumped off the bridge, you gonna jump off too,
Oh,
or
yes.
whatever it was. Because we were always all together, so everybody got chastised. Whether you was just there and didn't participate, you were there.
Right.
And we were taught certain things about, these are your people. You gotta protect them. You always look out. And even going to a PWI, a predominantly white institution. I went to the University of Louisville. There wasn't a lot of us. And I was also a scholarship student. So nobody from my high school went to that same college. But as far as Black people, there was 2 of us that went. And so we had to find people who were like-minded and, clubs to join, Association of Black Students.
Yeah.
I was a scholarship student for an academic scholarship, so we had the Porter Scholars, to find somewhere to belong, because you knew you needed to, and the African American minority faculty and staff and stuff on campus made sure, hey, I'm here, you know who I am, I know who you are. My office is a safe space, and we would just hang out, at the Multicultural Center or wherever, because that was our place.
That's a good point. She talked about going to the University of Louisville. See, when I graduated, we were told specifically not to go to the University of Kentucky and not to go to the University of Louisville. They were 2 racist institutions, and you were told specifically not to go.
See, okay, and I don't mean to interrupt you, but here, for coming from Elizabethtown, U of L was viewed as a very diverse school in terms of race. We always thought it was diverse,
That's during your time period. You gotta realize that there's
True.
a big age difference.
Well, kind of true, kind of not, because my grandparents always, when we were raised, not to be a UK fan, because they're historically, they did not allow Black people to attend the university, to play the sports, and so we always kind of gravitated towards U of L, because their history is, as far as diversity goes, they let Black players play, and they let Black people attend on the campus.
That's then. You gotta realize, I'm talking about 74.
Sure.
In 74, only 2 years earlier was the first Black to even go to UK.
Yeah.
Okay?
Say that again, please.
He was a basketball star. And did he not end up getting arrested?
Is
or
it
allegedly
raping a woman in the back of a VW bus, but he was 6'9"?
Yeah.
Yes, I've so heard that story.
Yeah. And he lived not 5 blocks from where I lived. So see, you gotta realize there was a big difference. At that time, U of L, like I said, It was not the place to be. There may have been one faculty member at U of L that was minority at that time, if that many.
Dr. Hudson?
Yeah.
J. Blaine Hudson?
You gotta understand, it wasn't till about 83 that the Kentucky Association of Blacks in Higher Ed was established. At that point in time, that's when there was a real outburst or whatever in terms of trying to demand that there be black faculty, that there be black staff on these campuses. Up until then, the Council on Post-Secondary Education had different initiatives, but they had not been very successful. You gotta realize, I was the first black female instructor that ever was here, and made full professor. Mr. Harris was the very first black professor, period. He was only here 2 years before I came. So as far as integration, you all gotta realize ECTC has not had a lot of integration.
To hear you verbally say that outright, I mean, I knew that about your career history, and I knew that about Mr. Harris, but to hear you verbally say that outright.
We were the first two. He was the first male, I was the first female. And you gotta understand, in a couple of years, both of us gonna be long gone.
I know.
And at that point, you gotta understand, other than Kay, there are no other black faculty.
There are
on
none.
this campus.
Let's be very clear, there are none.
I understand that better than anybody, because I look at the
And
numbers.
understand, in between there's only been about 3 or 4 others that have ever made it to retirement.
So let's dig, Miss Pam. And I think I might have asked you this one time before, and I want to hear from all the panelists. Why? What is it that stops somebody from coming
Going
here
to
on
this faculty.
coming here on into this faculty?
Money. I will tell you.
Okay.
Salaries are low.
Yeah.
African Americans.
Staff salaries are low too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A black African American professor can go almost anywhere else and make 2 to 3 times more than what they're paid here. That's one big obstacle. Second, you come to Elizabethtown, unless you're from a small town mentality, there's nothing here in E-Town socially or anything like that that would attract really, highly qualified African Americans. The third thing is you have to fit into this area. You can't change this area. When you come in here with that mentality that you're gonna change these people, you're not gonna last. Either you learn to get along or you're gonna get along. And that's one of the problems that a lot of the African Americans that have come here have had to face, especially if they're military.
You have to really have a passion for students and education.
Yes, you do.
And then, like I said, there is a climate here. There is a climate.
Yes, there is.
And if you don't know how to get along with people, you will have a serious problem.
I feel like in E-Town, I don't know how to describe it. I don't know how to put my finger on it. It is a great place to live.
For families, yes, small town.
Well, not even that so much, Miss Pam, but I feel like there's a lot of things that are ignored here in our small town. It's like if you speak out against if you complain about anything, it's like, well, it's fine here. What are you complaining about? This is a great community to live in.
If you have that small town, hometown mentality. But if you're a young, single person that's really wanting an area where you may want to find a husband, or you may want to be able to go out and, party and have a good time and things like that, E-Town
You don't
is
have
not
that
the
here.
place. It's not the place.
Yeah.
Y'all kids don't be partying.
Your kids don't be partying.
You got
No,
to
you
be.
just ain't got a Walmart's parking
That's
lot.
what I was gonna say. If you're not settled, more or less,
Right.
E-Town is not the place.
Correct. And I can definitely speak to that coming from Louisville. My journey that brought me to Elizabethtown was just because of I worked in a grant. Another company acquired the grant, and I just didn't care for that particular company. But I wanted to stay in higher education. I would have preferred to stay with KCTCS just because that's an institution that I was already in, so I wanted to stay. And then this position opened, and I was like, oh, okay, well, I can do that. And then I got the job, and I traveled back and forth from Louisville to Elizabethtown because I didn't want to move. I was like, there's nothing to do there. And the coming from Louisville, I didn't grow up in Louisville, but I lived in Louisville since I was 18. Once I graduated high school. And so coming from Louisville to Elizabethtown was very, very different when I decided I just didn't want to do that hour drive.
You remember how I looked at you when you said I'm moving to E-Town. I was like, are you sure about that?
Because I just got tired of the drive, and I was like, I can always, and I worked so much, in between in between teaching and then my other part-time job and then my full-time job here, I just didn't have the time. So moving to Elizabethtown was a conscientious decision to make. So I wasn't putting so much wear and tear on my car, going back and forth every day. I could have still had a social life on the weekends. But if I just wanted to go somewhere and maybe, eat some good food, have a drink, listen to some music, there wasn't many places to do that. I was going to have to go to Radcliffe and go to Jazzy Jokes or whatever, and then margaritas burnt down. So I never got to experience some margaritas.
You didn't miss much.
I'm sure. But to Ms. Pound's point, there is nothing socially to do. And Elizabethtown seems to have a very retired feel.
Okay.
You have retired military, and there's even the dichotomy between people who live in Radcliffe, which is Hardin County still, to the people who live in Elizabethtown. It is a totally different culture. There is more diversity as far as race and everything in Radcliffe than it is in Elizabethtown. So why is that?
Because again, you go back, this is a country, our hometown. I mean, I even had difficulty. I was born and raised in Louisville. So coming here was really hard for me to even go to church. The way the churches are here versus the way the churches were in Louisville, there was two different dynamics. The first time I went to First Baptist Church, I was used to being, vocal. We got into our services. I mean, people jumped, shouted, hooped, hollered, we praised the Lord. I came in this First Baptist and I thought I went to a cemetery. I was like, and I can remember Larry Smith, he was the pianist at the time. He said, don't let them quench your spirit.
Oh, yes. Oh, I love Mr. Smith.
He said, don't let them quench your spirit. Because I was sitting there going, what kind of people are these? They don't praise God? What is it?
And that is so something Mr. Smith would say.
And I was like, And then even to the attire, I can remember Reverend Bishop looking at me and saying, what church did you go to? And I said, well, I went to Emmanuel, but I was born and raised in Greater Salem. Oh, I should have known the fashion church. Well, Greater Salem was known. You didn't just come in there any old kind of way. This come as you are.
If it said it wasn't no such thing as come as you are.
No. That's the reason why you see Miss Pam to this day. I don't change for nobody. The hat, the gloves, everything on Sunday. Oh, that was Greater Salem. All the titles went up first. All the titles were clean. I mean, as a board of health, titles were put before all other parishioners. And that's the way it was. And when I came here, it was like, what? And a living soul in this church with a hat on. Do they not understand what the word says about the covering on your head?
Well, let me tell you, I remember you coming to First Baptist when I was a little girl. And I thought, thank you, Jesus. Somebody with some spirit. I loved it. When I saw Miss Pam, when I could see her big hat getting ready to raise, I was like, oh my God, we getting ready to have some fun in church. We getting ready to cut up. Miss Pam's gonna make us laugh. She's gonna have a fabulous hat on this morning. And I feel like you not quenching your spirit, just from my viewpoint, brought a lot of other people's. It empowered a lot of other people in the church to feel like it was okay to be themselves.
Well, that's
so
the reason
I want to tell you that.
Musical. I had to do something. And that's the one thing, going back to ECTC.
Yes.
You have to understand the reason why the gospel musical was first started, it was started by students here on this campus. At that time, a black student had written about there was no diversity on ECTC's campus. And the way she wrote the article, it was very scathing. It was to the point that the institution was very embarrassed because what the little girl wrote was true. At that point is when we started the multicultural committee. Up until then, there was no multicultural committee. We had started a black student union, but it kind of fizzled. We had 125 blacks that were very, very active.
Oh.
And they started their own black gospel group. And they were holiness. So they wanted to have a musical. They had the first musical in the the science auditorium. Well, the science auditorium, you all know, is very small. It doesn't have but like 170 something seats if it's got that many. There were people coming out of class that were of the other persuasion that called the fire department. And the fire chief came basically to disband us. We had as many people inside the science auditorium as we had outside. The kids initially didn't realize this many churches would have come to a musical. And once we had all these people here, you know that hallway is just so small. So he didn't want to cause problems because all the ministers jumped up and said, no, you will not stop God's work. So we had so many choirs that went outside the science auditorium and so many that stayed in, and they one at a time had to come in and sing. So when you start talking about diversity on this campus, it has truly evolved, okay? And at that point, the ministers, they banded together and said, you can come to our church because there wasn't space and you had a resistance. And it wasn't necessarily of the faculty or the administration at the time. It was the actual student body.
Well, I believe that that's the most important part is giving our students what they want, is making sure that they're satisfied.
And now we break for a program plug.
Hello, my name is Brianna Harris, and I'm an FYE 105 instructor and program coordinator. FYE 105 is a required course for Associate in Arts and Associate in Science students here at Elizabethtown Community and Technical College. But it's also just a good course to take even if you're not one of those students. Our main goals are to help students with self-exploration, self-management skills, including time management, financial education, all the way to career exploration, academic program planning, and then considering transfer options to get you to that four-year college of your dreams. We help students with all kinds of things, including study techniques, academic success skills, etc., etc. Even if you have a solid idea of what you want to do with your life, which, let's be honest, isn't very many of us, then you can still benefit from taking the FYE 105 class to consider your choices and help finalize them and consider other options that might better suit you.
As we talk about diversity, and Miss Pam, we haven't heard a lot from you, so I'm going to pick on you very first. As I was perusing Facebook, it saddened me really to see that for our federal employees that diversity, equity, and inclusion training has been banned.
Yes.
Let's talk about a little bit about, that feeling that you get from hearing that, and then going over the historical aspects that we just discussed there with ECTC. What kind of feelings does that give you as a minority or an underrepresented population here?
It totally angers me and saddens me at the same time because, it's very much in this culture and climate right now is needed. We need diversity training because there's so much out there, so much misinformation about one another. And without that, we don't learn from other cultures, and we don't learn mistakes, and we don't learn how to make it better. And for me, as a person being in the climate, still, I feel like that still needs that diversity training. That discussion, I don't understand why they canceled that. It's very much needed. We need to learn about one another. Otherwise, I feel like it's just going to stifle having a multicultural, and I always push multicultural.
Yes.
Because it's just not about
It's not about black and white or female
we
and
gotta
male.
have, I mean, the disabled, if we imagine we open up our campus to more individuals, you have more individual thinking, and it soon spreads and you learn from one another. And then we have a multicultural environment where anyone can come on campus. Like whether you have a disability, whether you're of a different ethnicity, nationality, we bring all those ideas and thoughts together and we begin to learn from one another and experience one another. And if you cut out the training to at least allow you to have an open mind to receive that, where are we going to be?
It sends a very strong message.
Yes. And so whose thought is it going to be? This one person's thought that everyone abides by? Because things don't change that way.
Well, innovation doesn't happen in a room where everybody looks, feels, and thinks the same.
Yeah. So I'm like, that's just very disappointing to me because I really believe that in order for change, you have to have those discussions, you have to have those trainings because everybody's not going to get that training.
That's right.
When you come from your house, you're going to be bringing on what you socialized to think, and you're going to implement that on the people that you have nothing, your ideas and whatever you grew up with, you're going to implement that. And if yours is the main thought, then what is the culture going to look like on the campus or for the future to come? So, I don't like that that's happened, and I hope that it changed because there definitely still needs to be training.
Absolutely.
Especially when you start talking about, for instance, I remember when the first homosexual student came on this campus. And they decided they were wanting to go through the actual physical change of their body, and they wanted to use the women's restroom. You should have seen the way not only of the students, but of the faculty and staff responded to that young man. And without that type of training and understanding, it could have probably helped him a whole lot. Ultimately, he ended up, I think, committing suicide.
Oh my goodness.
Because he ended up going on posts and basically he portrayed himself as a female, but the whole transition hadn't taken place. And he ended up, I think they found his body in the graveyard where someone had molested him, and then he just...
That's what hate can do. That's what ignorance and hate can breed.
I think you said a good word.
Ignorance and hate. That's what it can
Kill
breed.
ignorance
Nope.
unless you learn.
Unless you learn.
Unless you learn.
And you have to be open to being exposed. And that's one thing about higher education. It is about the experience. You are at an institution, and ECTC is an open access institution. So that means anybody can come.
That's right.
You know what I mean? And so there's no admissions as far as, selective, you can't come. Or, your acceptance has been denied.
Right.
We don't have that here. As a college program, yes. College, no. And so you are going to, by nature, interact with people who don't look like you, who don't think like you, who, have a completely different lifestyle than you do. And in order for students to get along and for faculty and staff to get along and to at least have a commonality, then diversity training is a must, and it's not anti-American. I think that's what frustrated me,
Right,
that
yeah.
angered me about the notice that came
Who is the
out.
real American?
That it's in any type of diversity training that teaches whatever is considered un-American. Like, what do you mean?
I forgot about
Is it
that.
not a melting pot?
Right. I don't make it make sense to me because I don't understand what's so un-American about inclusiveness.
It depends on what your view of American looks like.
There you go.
I think that's what it depends on. It depends on if your view of American looks like a white male who's Christian, who's heterosexual, then yeah. Teaching about, LGBTQ or Black or African American or Native American or Indigenous people, yeah, that's un-American.
But it's not, because even if you think about the history of America,
Sure,
yeah. Okay,
The Indians were here before.
for one, right, you didn't discover something that was already here when
Right.
you spoke on it. vote here, but that's a whole nother conversation. We're not gonna talk about Columbus. But even if you think about the structure of the United States and them, breaking from Britain
Yeah.
because they wanted to have their right to religion and, not be under the tyranny of the British and all of that. So even thinking about rebellion and wanting to have your own, what do you think other people want to do?
Right.
Like, was it okay for you to try to get under the thumb of the British, but African Americans can't get under the thumb of you?
And that's what really
Or
shocks
whatever.
me when people talk about the peaceful protesting, okay? It's just like, hey, God, this is not new, okay? Redcoats did it. We had a Boston Tea Party.
Look at your history.
I can think of a lot of other ways that peaceful protests have existed.
You had a whole civil war.
Yeah, we're not going to, no justice, no peace. And they mean it. And every day that I get up in the morning, I praise God for those brave people that are
Brave.
protesting out there on Jefferson Square. If I didn't have 3 little babies, I'd be out there myself. Shantae, I know you've been out there protesting. We
Yes.
thank you for your dedication. That's what I'm like. Protesting is nothing new. It's nothing new. People are
You
not.
have that right to peaceful assembly.
That's right.
And plus, again, I probably already said this, but protesting is for the people. If you can't express your pain and it's not accepted, that's where it's going to go. If I can't kneel, if I can't speak, if I can't sleep, if I can't walk, if I can't look a certain way, and you can't hear me and I can't cry because someone has been killed or someone on national TV, and it continues to happen till this day with no
It's
repercussions
happened.
or accountability.
I think 3 more Black American males have died since our Part 1 podcast. Am I correct in saying that?
Yeah, I think
What,
it's
Elijah McCain.
The other gentleman outside the Wendy's.
the one that had the
Yes,
battles.
in Atlanta, outside of Wendy's, and there's been a few more.
There's been a few more. There's been also lynchings, which they call suicide.
How? That's what I'm saying.
How can you? Yeah. So I'm like,
rope around your neck and you gonna kill yourself.
You gonna kill-
that way. Yeah.
and
You
so-
gonna
and-
climb the tree?
Hey, with no help.
Let's walk through this.
so
let's walk through this
it's
step by
like-
step, please.
Without
Make it make sense.
without protest, if you don't allow people to express, because we're not allowed to talk back, we're not allowed to express our pain. We're not, I went through all that. But if you don't allow people to express what we call peacefully, eventually it's got to come out. Protesting is a way to deal with your pain. And there's a lot of people suffering right now. What they also don't realize is it's not even about Black Lives Matter. It's just Lives Matter, period now. Because when you take away everything, I have no money. I have no food. I may not even have a place to live.
And
It's
I'm
about
scared to death about this virus.
it's about survival at this point, and you're not listening. But you will care if I tear that building down. You're gonna listen, and it's not right. But what other choice do you leave people who can't, and you won't allow to have a voice? So
We have an extra visitor who has traveled around the world several times. Is one of my favorite faculty here at ECTC. He wrote me a note and he said his Kevin Parrott, if you haven't ran into Kevin Parrott, taken his classes or traveled with him, do it. Without protest, America would be doing more of a tea drinking nation. We drink coffee because of the Boston Tea Party. So that's where, and hey, look, and I'm a coffee drinker. You know that. Coffee's important to me. That's right. So,
I
and
had my 2 cents to that. I heard that. I was like, yeah, you're right.
protest is the voice of the
another voice is voting.
There you go.
Okay, I got into a conversation with a Caucasian friend of mine. We're neighbors, and we love each other. We always vibe, and we're able to maybe see not eye to eye, but we have good conversations. And we got to talking about voting, and he was racing off his opinion about Biden and Kamala and Trump and Pence, and my husband, who might be Farrakhan, but my husband turned to him and said, "Do you even vote, man?" And he was like, no. He said, until you start voting, I don't even want to holler at you. Don't even talk to me. Your vote is your active way. That is your action. That is your way of saying, this is what I want versus this.
Right.
And then I got to thinking deeper on it, and I was like, every female and Black person should be voting.
whether you are completely in agreement
I'm
or
telling
not,
you.
if you do not vote, you are casting a vote for the negative
Next-
side. And
That's
you've
right.
got to understand that. You've got to.
Can you say that last part again? You are casting.
The vote for the opposite side that you're supposed to be totally against.
That's right.
By not voting, you are voting for the other person.
You
Remember
are.
that.
You are. And you have to understand the way we got where we are right now is through the vote. And if you don't exercise that, I will repeat, history repeats itself. If you don't do this, you are putting yourself back in bondage.
That's right. Why do you think people fought to the death to have the right to vote? And a lot of people don't know. When white women got the right to vote, they waited. It still trickled down because they waited a couple years after till our black males and our black females could vote after that. So, I mean, that's from that. You have to vote. People have sacrificed their life.
But I think that's where that training that needs to happen because just watching the movie Selma and the documentary of Selma reminded me why I need to vote. There's people that literally got ate by dogs.
Yeah.
Literally got pounded in the head, literally. And they tried to cross that bridge more than once. And they had the right to vote.
But you know what that says to me? That says that those people that were doing the excessive beating knew the power
Thank
of the
you.
vote.
We were right there because I say, do people understand? If you think about it, they have, and I'm saying they as just a word, not pointing fingers or anything, but history has shown that African Americans, and we'll just say, African Americans, because that's what we're talking about, that there has just been systematically roadblock after roadblock after roadblock. You can't do this. We don't want you to do that. You're 3/5 of a person. You're this, you're that, you're that, you're that. Why? What are you so afraid of? And if you understand what they're afraid of, that can tap into our power. We are powerful beyond measure, and people don't understand that. You know what I mean? Like, why would you keep trying to put something down?
Right.
It's like trying to get the sun not to shine every day. Like, you cannot stop it. We are great people. And they was like, nah, nope, they can't vote. Because they understood in their mind somewhere how powerful we could be as a collective. And I don't know if there were stories from when we were in Africa and, we had such power. And, we come from kings and queens. And they knew that. But then they bring us here and then they strip you of all of that.
But they hid that from
know.
us.
That's the reason why you weren't allowed to go to school.
Right.
There you
This
go.
is the reason why we need to be on the rooftop telling our young people, you need to go to college. You need to empower yourself. Because just like you need to make sure you vote, you need to be educated so that you can comprehend and understand what is happening to you.
I'm telling you, my grandmother was an 8th grade graduate from the country. And the one thing she told me, I was terrified to go to college, terrified beyond measure. And she told me education is the one thing nobody can ever take away from you. Ever.
Yeah.
And the more you keep building up on it, the better, wiser that you'll get and the more empowered that you will become.
And it's just a level of understanding, of why things are and what you can do to, make a splash in it. We all can't individually change, but, change the world, but collectively we can.
Yes.
We just have to get on one accord.
I think that's what
Which
they're
is so
scared.
divisive.
I think that's what the other. I'm trying to use inclusive language here, and I don't want to keep referring to they, them.
Right.
Okay, so we'll say populations other than African American and Black. I think that's the fear. Is the collectivism. What could happen if we are to collect and bind together and become stronger? I think that is a fear.
Well, I think it goes back to what you said at the very beginning, Pam, that, there's the togetherness. Because, as we were brought over here, we communicated through our own language. And together, it was all different tribes. And they knew once they got all those, even though we were maybe fighting against one another, because that happens, but once they put everybody together, they sung, they communicate in their own language. Then when we got over here, we created songs to communicate, to keep that togetherness, because they were splitting up families. They were selling you one by one. But it's that togetherness, because that's natural for our people. We are naturally happy people. We're naturally collective, togetherness people. We work better together. But when you begin to split us apart,
Your power splices.
our power spice. And so therefore, if you educate that person and they begin to educate that other person and they begin to educate that other person and we begin to infiltrate, we begin to form a bond, that fear of taking over is what fears, and this fuels everybody to, we can't let this happen. So we keep the animosity and all that turmoil going on. Dividing, because divided you can't stand.
But you know what's interesting is that we don't want anything further than we just want equality.
Right.
I just want, and I think I said this on part one, but if you got, I was hungry on part one, I did say, if you got a ribeye steak and it's got a big pat of herb butter on there, I want that same cut of ribeye steak. I don't want anything past or more what you have. I just want to be thought of and treated in the same manner that you are. It's about equality.
And what's so
But what
sad,
comes
sounds
with
so
equality
simple.
comes other things. And so I think that is the fear. Oh, they
Well,
want
that's the giving of power
Right.
from the power.
Right. Exactly. Because, okay, well, they want equality. Then they're going to want this. And then they're going to want that. And no, they can't have that. Because then it lessens what they can do. And what
Absolutely.
they can have. When we all can have it all.
We all
I'm
can
telling
have it all.
that's
We all
the
can
purpose
have
of
it
a
all.
capitalistic society.
But you gotta understand, there's only so many scarce resources out here.
Sure.
There you go.
And you gotta remember, the most powerful are going to try to make sure they keep their advantage.
And stay. Yes.
They're not willing to actually be able to separate everything and give it out equally. They don't want that. Therefore, they're gonna do everything that they possibly can to keep their advantage.
And that's that individualism
Yeah.
that comes into play. And then what kills me, and I know we gotta bring it back to ECTC and stuff, but I think what bothers me as like a rebuttal for equality is, well, we had a black president for 8 years. If I could, that infuriates me more than anything, because we are 13% of the population of the United States. Oh, let's say a fourth. Less than 20. It's less than 25%.
Yes.
We as black people did not elect Obama.
Right.
By ourselves.
Wasn't just me.
It wasn't just me. It wasn't just us, and there was some of us who didn't either. So, especially the second election. But that kills me. So just because there was a black president, one, he was 44. 44. So we had 43 other presidents that weren't him. There was one in a time. It was just a good sweet spot. Because we've had African Americans trying to run for president
We
for
sure
a very
have.
long time.
Good old Jesse Jackson put his hat in
You
there.
know, you had, other people trying to, you had Shirley Chisholm. You had a whole bunch of
Yes.
people trying to do a whole bunch of things. But it was just a mix of timing, and it was a mix of timing.
Well, if you read Shirley Chisholm's whole story, and I'm sure you have. Very interesting. If you hadn't had the chance to read Shirley Chisholm's biography, and especially her political plight,
Yeah,
it's very interesting.
it
It
is.
is.
And you have to give Obama his credit.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
His charisma, his presentation, his background, all of that, it spoke for itself too.
It did.
And that's the reason why you had so many others outside of the black
That
community
wanted to follow.
that
Yeah,
absolutely.
elected him.
And even prior to that, it goes back to the time too, because we had just came from the Bush era, and it was just a whole lot of things people were tired of, and even the Clinton era, and to me it was just like that perfect storm.
It was fresh, it was
It was
new.
just the time, and I don't know if we'll ever get that back. Even now with the time of Biden and Kamala, say what you want about her, but I mean, at this point, it is what it is. You know, she had a job to do as a prosecutor in California. I'm not saying that some of the things that she did wasn't questionable as a prosecutor or some of the ideology, but you also think in a perception of power and and actual power is two different things.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? Yes, she was a prosecutor, but she still had to answer.
Your hands are tied at some points and structures too.
Correct.
Yes.
Correct.
Nobody's gonna be perfect. They're not. But at the same time, it's what I tell people all the time. What's the lesser of the two evils?
Yes.
There you go.
Oh Lord.
I'm not gonna let y'all dive into politics. I'm gonna bring us back and let's begin to talk about our experiences as Black professional women. So, and I'm sure all of you all are familiar with this poem, but there's a poem by Langston Hughes called "We Wear the Mask," and just basically to give you some context about what that poem means, it's basically just kind of depicting the way that African Americans are one way, maybe at home or with family. And then on the outside, when it comes to maybe work or in social settings, that we maybe put on another mask. What I want to ask you all, do you still feel like that poem is relevant for today? And do you feel like you ever fall into the cusp of wearing that mask and changing it from environment to environment?
It's called assimilation. Like you have to, and we'll say it's professionalism, but I mean it basically for me boils down to having to assimilate, having to be a part of a culture, because you have, culture is not just, your race or your religious culture. It is like your work culture, how people behave and the group think that goes on at your place of employment. And so I think in order to get along, kind of like how Ms. Pam said, if you were an African American professor on this campus, you had to go along, get along, shuck and jive, however you want to say it. Like you had to, or you weren't going to be here long. You were not going to fit in.
Yes.
You stood out too much. And sometimes we as African Americans find ourselves having to dumb ourselves down a little bit so we can be more accepted. We straighten our hair because we might be the only Black person in our department, and we know that our department can't take my full natural, if that's the case.
Heck, I can't take it.
Going along with what Shantae says, you have to understand, because I've taught sociology for years. Culture includes your non-material as well as your material culture. So you have to understand, people are going to make value judgments about you as soon as they see you. Okay, so you're going to have to look a certain way in terms of your apparel in certain settings. You can't just come flying in here with these blue jeans on or whatever, and you're supposed to be the instructor. You can't do that. The same way, I could be out here on the block with my buddies and I could talk one way. I mean, I
Okay, but Ms. Pam, let me ask you a
But I
question.
can't come in here and talk that same way in here.
But do you think that, I lost my thought. Do you think that's fair? I guess without me sugarcoating it, is that fair to a Black female to not be able to be your full self? And then I kind of wish we had a white female on the panel too, because I'd like to ask, do you all fall into those cusps? It's just,
Well, it depends on, it's not just the race, it also depends on the class, okay? So you could have a poor white who could experience some things just like a Black. Whereas if you have a more upper class white, they may not have to go through as many changes, okay? So when you start talking about the culture, you have to realize, as a Black female, you still are going to have to be, quote unquote, twice as good in some areas in order to be accepted.
I feel that.
And if you don't come off in that manner, you will be treated differently. So as far as making sure everything is grammatically correct, as far as making sure that you're dressed appropriately, as far as knowing how to interact with people in a certain manner, people are going to expect certain behaviors out of you in certain settings. So I always tell people that I feel like I'm Sybil sometimes. There's a Pam Harper, and then there's a professional Pam Harper.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, depending on the setting, I have to show myself with the different masks of the faces, depending on when and where I am. I have to change it up.
I feel like it's harder for Black females, though. It's exhausting.
It's exhausting.
It is exhausting to have to. It's equally exhausting when there's not a lot of you, and then your colleagues look at you like you are supposed to be the spokesperson for the whole entire race.
Yes.
You know, and we're not monolithic people. So my experience is going to be very different than someone else's. So you can't ask me to speak for the whole, or expect me to be able to explain Blackness to you, because I can't do that.
My Blackness looks different than your Blackness.
Right.
It looks different than Miss Pam's. Looks different than Miss
Right.
Pam's.
And that's where the training comes in, you know, the whole
Yes.
implicit bias. And you're going to have thoughts about people when you see them. But are those thoughts going to affect how you interact with them, how you talk to them? Or are you going to limit their capabilities just simply because of a thought? You know, and so people being aware of those things, it's not necessarily wrong to have a thought or a frame of reference, you know, but is that frame of reference stopping you from getting to know, you know, have I been pulled over by a cop? Of course, I speed. It happens. Okay.
I've seen
but
your little black car moving very fastly.
I got places to go. But does that mean that every single cop is going to pull me over? Probably not. But I have a frame of reference, and I know that this could happen, so then I'm going to act accordingly, or whatever the case may be. You know, it's just going back to the whole training thing, you know, just being more self-aware, because it starts with you. You know, if you are more self-aware and it translates to how you affect other people that you interact with, and that you're more open to it. And so that's why that whole argument with, to bring it back to training, just bothers me, because people
Yes.
need that. You just need it when you interact with others.
Especially
And that way you can understand. You can be more culturally sensitive
Yes.
to what people go through, because it's not just about you, and everything isn't just about your experience growing up,
Right.
however you did. That's it.
And I just think, as far as wearing the mask, we have that unacquired responsibility as African American women, and maybe sometimes first, like if we don't, we can ruin it for everyone coming behind us. We have that responsibility.
Ooh, yeah,
like,
that's this is a
if I
responsibility.
don't meet up to their expectation or their standards,
They ain't gonna
then
hire
it ain't
nobody
gonna
else.
hire nobody. But and a lot of people don't
And
realize.
it reinforces, yeah, they lazy,
Yeah.
they're this, they're that. Like, we have to carry that.
And a lot of people don't realize, for every 10 people of non-color that's hired, only 1 or 2 people of color is
Yes.
hired. So there's a lot of us competing for the same jobs, but if one of us two mess up, that's where it's going to end. And so we have to wear the mask. We have to be articulate. We have to be what their view of professionalism. We have to fit in and assimilate, like Shantae was saying, into the environment, changing our hair, changing our language, you know, and it doesn't just happen in your sector where you're working. As you go around campus, you have to adapt to each, because you begin to learn people. And until people get comfortable with you, you're always going to be having changing faces. And so, yeah, I feel like I'm always
Code
wearing a
switching.
mask. Yeah.
We teach students that.
Yes,
And-
we
and-
do.
And let me say, for me, and for the audience, we're not saying that it's always necessarily a bad thing, because there's just things about being appropriate. You learn that coming up in church.
Yes.
You know, it's just certain things you say and certain things you don't say. You wait your turn. You know, you stay out of grown folk business. You know, it's just certain things of being appropriate. And so we don't want it to seem like wearing a mask always is wrong. But when it stifles my growth
Yes.
as a person, you know, then that's when it becomes a problem. But we all code switch. You know, your vernacular changes in whatever environment that you're in, because I can't talk as, you know, Miss Sharber or Miss Shantae as I do with my students, as I do with my sorors, or that I do with my friends, or that I do in church, or whatever the case may be. So we all have pockets of times where we have to adapt and change. But I think what we're talking about is just the heaviness of it and the automatic expectation that we can't come in being our full selves.
Right. That makes
Because it's not going to be
excellent point.
accepted.
And that's so exhausting because you can't be.
Yeah.
You can't. 'Cause every now and then I catch myself, hey girl, you know, how you? And then it's like, oh man, because you're being judged by each other too. And it's like, but I say to myself, why can't I say, hey girl?
Well,
You
I'm a
can't.
different kind of person. Because Sade can tell you. I mean, I say, hey, y'all, what's up? I'm not going to change that for anybody. Now, when I need to get serious and professional, yes, I'll get serious and professional. But I can't. I decided a long time ago, like personality and like God gave it to you, you got to use it.
Well, I used to be like that until the expectations for me to be like that. Oh, or, you know, the expectation when people like, and maybe it's just a little bit of me, you know.
Personality, I think, rules a lot too.
You know, I'm more accepting than somebody of color would come and say, hey, girl, because I feel their authenticity. But then when people start that's not a color and they're like, hey, girl, I feel like that's
Cultural appropriation, maybe, yeah,
cultural
a little bit.
appropriation. And so that's why I'm always aware. I'm like, because of the environment I'm in, I'm like, man, and my experiences of racism.
Right. And being yourself is fine as long as you're willing to suffer the consequences.
That's right.
There you go.
That's the point.
Because people will be critical of
Because
you.
you are going to be treated a certain manner based on how you interact with other people. And it can be as simple as the way you conduct yourself or the way you wear your clothes. Prime example, I can go into certain malls and be dressed to the nine and honey, get the best service in the world. Come out here with some blue jeans and they looking at me like, she getting ready to steal something.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Automatic labels will be placed on you depending on how you interact with people. So you have to be aware of that. You want to be yourself, okay? Be willing to accept how people will then treat you.
And that's
But
the
if you
important
want
point.
people to treat you in a different manner, you better realize you are going to have to change based on certain situations. Prime examples I can give, when I first came here, there were like 100-something people that applied for my job. I could not believe it. When I went into the area where the actual receptionist was, I asked her, how many people are they going to interview? If they had all these people to apply for the position, how many are they actually going to interview? Well, evidently they didn't have a lot to do, and it was a very small faculty back then. So they interviewed like 40-something people.
Oh, gosh, that's very competitive. Shoo.
It was worse than that. When I walked in, I'm expecting in any interview, you have one person, no more than two people that you talk to. Not then, it was a tribunal. I walked in and it was a classroom full of everybody and anybody you can think of.
And what was your
From
first
the
position here,
president-
Miss Pam?
It was over the learning lab. I was basically the supervisor. And I mean, the president was there, the vice president, the dean of students, Dale Buckles, I mean, the whole room.
Oh, man.
Do you think that was the same interview experience that your other interview
Everybody got
applicants?
that.
Okay. As long as that's fair, you know, as long as we're carrying it across the board.
Because of the fact, the nature of the job, you were to work with every aspect of the college. But people looked at me and said, oh, they hired you because you were black. I said, no, baby, there were 6 other blacks that also applied, okay? They hired me
Because I'm the best.
I could communicate. I came in and I showed them within that 30 minutes that I strung out because I got diarrhea of the mouth, 45 to an hour, that I was able to fit in, that I was competent, that I could do the job. That's how come I was hired. Not because I was black, because there was 6 other blacks. Why didn't pick them? Okay, let's go there. So you gotta realize, depending on what situation you're in, you're going to have to put your best foot forward, period. And if that means you can't talk like you out here with your sisters,
Of course, yes.
then hey, you better not if you want to move ahead. So you have to decide within your own mind, is this worth it? Is being me that important versus me moving up?
Well, when I say I'm being me, I choose to have a bubbly, kind of more friendly, outgoing personality when it comes to dealing with business.
That's fine.
But Layla can tell you, my daughter's here, when I'm at home, I'm a completely different person. But I don't ever want to turn into that stale, like, funky, cheesy professional who's like, that's just not, it's never gonna be me, and I'm not gonna do that. And that's where I'm at. When you see me in the hallway, I'm gonna smile, I'm gonna say hello, I know about everybody's names on campus, that's gonna be me. So that's what I mean by being myself. I choose not to be like the,
Right.
See you down the
You don't have
hallway
to
and
be
don't
stuck
speak
up.
and
No, you
Right.
don't have to be.
right. And I think there are some environments that celebrate that there's not as much of a restriction
Yes.
on
Yes.
you. You know,
Right.
if we were in a corporate America, or if you're a a lawyer, or if you work in just certain industries, they are more restrictive.
Yes.
And everybody is in a dark suit. And you're there's a culture, your hair is pulled back. And
You
in
have to
higher
fit in.
education, there is still a level of freedom to be who you are, because if we're in higher education, we should be celebrating
right, diversity.
diversity,
Sure.
and individualism, and to be yourself, and to get in a space where you can explore who you are as a student, because this is the place where it should be a collective of ideas. It should be the marketplace of new ideas.
Absolutely.
That's what college should be. And so by that nature, if you subscribe to that ideology, your faculty and staff should also be that way, to be inclusive and to be open, and
there you
to support a different mindset. I told some students just yesterday, there was an assignment where I asked them to compare and contrast something. I don't remember what I said, but one student in their paper was like, I don't feel like this assignment helped me at all. And explain why. And
I
don't
can't
tell
take that.
me what I want to hear. Like, this ain't for me. This is for you. So if you feel like this assignment didn't help you learn more about yourself, or it was a self-survey that they had to do about their attitudes toward college and their level of motivation and something else, and then the reflection part is like, well, how did you feel that this assignment helped you? It's like, well, I don't feel like it helped me at all because I'm pretty self-aware. I appreciate that. Don't give me a bunch of
Fluff.
foolishness. Don't give me a bunch of fluff. I'm grading on what your content is, not necessarily what it contains.
That is your reflection. You articulate.
Whatever your opinion
Correct.
is, then hey, fine.
And that's to be how that's how it should be.
Yes.
You should be able to express yourself as you are and not feel like you're going to be persecuted for who you are
Absolutely.
But I think
on
this,
the college campus.
for me, this comes back to what you said, Pam, that you can be who you are, but you got what you're going to receive.
And where.
When you receive that, and if that puts you in a place where people feel that it's okay to be a certain way toward you because you just said, hey girl, now I'm going to act, I'm already judging who you completely are. And I don't like that. I like you to be authentic with me.
Yes.
And so therefore, I do find myself being reserved in that aspect because I don't want to be the black girl. And so I just find that sometimes it's hard to be able to be yourself and relax, but if it's natural, then yeah, definitely do it. But pick and choose,
Yeah, right. And once you are in an environment and people know who you are, then you can relax. And people understand who you are. Because everybody knows who Miss Pam is. They know how I am. And if they don't, they will real quick. Because I'm outspoken. And people know that. Whereas if you go to a totally new, different environment, they don't know you. So you have to kind of feel your way.
Feel your way. Of course. Fill the room out. Absolutely.
Yes, you do.
Well, like the last podcast, I'm kind of always hungry. I don't know what that is. So we're going to get ready to wrap up. And so I'm going to shoot back to my panelists and kind of ask them, one, did you all enjoy yourselves today?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Pam, give me something that you would want a listener listening to this podcast to take away from. Just give me something for our listeners to take away.
Well, I would like the listeners to just be empathetic toward others. Put yourself in their shoes without being judgmental, because your ideas and your thoughts are not necessarily what the person you interact with is. They don't subscribe to all those things. And so if you are encountering with someone else, open yourself up to learning and getting to know the person without judgment, without stereotyping them, without using what you was socialized. Take that, and they have a word for it, but it's to wipe the slate clean and just meet the individual and allow yourself to get to know that person as an individual, and that's a person. Don't group them into any groups. Just look at the person as the individual and just be empathetic. Because I think if you're empathetic, then you can't be harsh. Mm-hmm. Because I wouldn't feel this way, being treated this way. And I just need for people to be more empathetic.
I think that's a great takeaway, and that to me also brings in of humanizing your biases.
There you go.
Like if you have a bias against somebody, pull open a book and learn about that population. Go ask somebody, like humanize it, because it's very hard to hate what you can actually touch and feel and see, and you know that person has those feelings. So
Excellent point.
I think that's, be empathetic. That's a big, broad topic, but it means so much. Shantae?
She took it out. Like, we can end on her.
Well, that's how big of a point it is.
It is. I mean, even when you think about, and I had a whole thought while she was talking about not discrediting someone else's experience. Well, that didn't happen to me. Well, it happened to me. I worked there too. They didn't treat me like that.
What were the facts?
Dead kill? What are the facts? Truth is relative. Let's not go there. But so one thing I would just say to be mindful of people's experiences and don't discredit when people are telling you how they feel.
Because you have a lot to learn from other people's individual experiences.
Absolutely.
So important.
Absolutely.
Ms.
I would
Pam?
say that.
I want the viewers to understand, do not judge people on anything but the content of their minds, not the color of their skins, not their race, not their religion or anything else. Understand, our world is like a variety of desserts in a bakery. You have all different kinds, and they all taste good.
Oh my goodness.
Life is like a box of chocolates.
Yes, it is. You can't have just one.
Well, that ends our part 2 podcast. Like I said, this is going to win an Emmy and an Oscar, I'm pretty sure. Daytime TV, right? So it'll be an Emmy. So we want to thank you all for joining us today for our part 2 podcast on, I don't even know what to call it. I'm just going to call it a conversation with my best girlfriend colleagues. I don't know, but this is going to end it. Thank you all for joining us, and be sure to tune in for all the FYE podcast talks.
Remember to vote.
Oh yes, rock that vote. Rock it hard.